If we say we live in a broken or unhealthy world, there are systems, there are methodologies that may intersect with science and religion to achieve a better outcome. This we may call medicine and health. But is it so much helping us, or is it actually harming us? Let us look into this huge field of study, which affects individuals often directly on a personal basis. Perhaps it is taking a pill too hard to swallow, or perhaps it is giving a taste of our own medicine.
Things become so normalized, but me, as someone who's been out of the profession for about 6 years now, I have a different, more zoomed out perspective. And so I have this perspective of, okay, when I wrote my book, Residency Dropout, why did so many people come to me and say, I left medicine years ago, but I never felt like I could talk about it? And they're kind of hiding in shame. Why is it that one of my clients, when she made the decision to leave medicine, one of her neighbors came to the door and then, in the middle of the day, and she hid because she didn't want them to know she was home, because she didn't want them to know she left medicine. Like, why is there such deep shame, guilt? Why are these kind of feelings around leaving medicine? Why is it that when I post an article on LinkedIn sharing about my story of like choosing myself and leaving the profession, that I get comments that are like, shame on you for leaving? And so I'm here just kind of observing all of this. And I feel a little bit more third party now, and things just don't feel right. Things are not sitting right with me. Another part of it, like, why is it that people feel they need to commit suicide in order to escape the profession? Like, we know that the rate of suicide among physicians is higher than other professions, higher than the general population. And it's like, why is that our only means of escape? And so really the article came about from me just like looking around and asking questions. And then I watched this documentary about the Nexium cult, and I was like, this all feels a little familiar. If you're devoting all of your time to this group, and you are debilitating like from this work routine, then you're also not really engaging with people outside of the group. So then a lot of your social circle becomes really small. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. That definitely was true for me. I remember feeling early on in medicine, like, oh, my college friends don't get it. They don't get how hard this is and like what I'm doing. And then so you start to feel like you can't relate to other people, which causes you to self-isolate. But then you're also so busy that then you just isolate circumstantially. And then you don't get perspective outside of the group. So when I tell anyone outside of the medical profession, which are most of my friends now, that doctors work a 24-hour shift, every single person I tell is appalled. No one can actually believe it. And I'm like, that's so wild, because how normal is it in the medical world to do that? Yeah. So it's like, you don't get perspective because you're so enmeshed in what's going on.
Unquestioning commitment. Okay, from day one, medical students are taught to revere the system. Questioning the status quo, that's frowned upon. You're expected to accept the hierarchy and keep your head down. Suppression of doubts. Expressing concerns about work hours, mental health, or systemic issues can often lead to being labeled as weak or uncommitted. Now, I myself am quite the squeaky wheel. Whenever I encountered anytime I see an opportunity for improvement, I have a very critical eye, and I would bring it up and be like, hey, you know what? I think this would be a lot more efficient if we did this way. Or, I've noticed we have a problem with this. I think we should do this way. And I was labeled as a complainer. I'm not even kidding you. I got that as feedback I remember from one of my rotations in residency. Okay, that's like, I am a doctor, I have graduated from medical school, and I am a critical thinker, and I was labeled by that attending as a complainer. And mind you, I don't complain about anything. I'm a people pleaser. So I'm telling you here, there's a lot of suppression going on in the healthcare industry. Now, third, mind numbing techniques. Long shifts, sleep deprivation, of which there certainly are. I did countless, hundreds of 24-hour shifts with no sleep. And constant stress, which I can definitely attest to. I am still trying to heal my cortisol imbalance years later. All those things serve to wear down your resistance and your critical thinking. Now, fourth, exploitation. Now, this is a big one for me. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I believe the residency system is basically legal or legalized exploitation of labor. Resident physicians often work 80 to 100 hours a week. There's actually an 80-hour work week law that was put into effect after a patient probably more than one patient, but one known patient died as a result of residents being overworked and working for far too many hours in a week. And all of that, by the way, is done on meager pay. So when you're in medical school, I don't know if you know this, but you actually are paying to be there. Obviously, that's where medical student loans come from. You take out student loans and you pay to get your education. Then you graduate and you join a residency program, and you have to be accepted to that as well. And it might be in a completely different state. You're moving far away from your family. You're being isolated from friends and family. And then you are working up to, for an ACGME accredited program, up to 80 hours a week. And you are getting paid roughly $40,000 to $50,000 a year. And this is all while being told that it's a rite of passage. Don't worry about it. We all did it. We all had it worse than you. You have it so much better than we did, blah, blah, blah. Now, residency is where the exploitation becomes glaringly obvious. And according to Wikipedia, residents are, as I noted, I know this firsthand, are allowed to work a maximum of 80 hours a week. That's what I alluded to before, the ACGME rules. Okay, that's to be an accredited graduate medical education training program. You have to mandate that residents work no more than 80 hours a week. But listen to this, that's averaged over a 4-week period. So there were times that I worked 100 hours. I was counting my time, my clock in and clock out time, and I was like, holy crap, I worked 100 hours this week. And I was immediately sent home when I brought it up because I didn't want to get the residency program in trouble. But most people don't even bring it up, to be honest with you, because it's frowned upon. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to kill somebody because I'm like losing my mind over here. There's no way. But as I mentioned, enforcement is lax and many exceed this limit. And remember, that's over a 4-week period. So you might work 100 hours one week and then 60 hours the next week. But hey, that averages out, right? That's still, remember, the average full-time job is between 32 to 40 hours a week in America. Now, imagine working 28-hour shifts 4 times a month for years. 4 times a month, 28-hour shifts. I would love to be a resident with a 4 times a month, 28-hour shift. That does not happen. For us, it's all day, every day, 6 to 7 days a week. And you get maybe a couple of weeks of vacation, just so you know. It's not just grueling, it's dangerous. And sleep-deprived doctors, as we all know, are more prone to errors, which push patients at risk. I don't want a sleep-deprived doctor taking care of me, and I am one, okay? Now let's talk about the debt trap. Let's talk money. The average medical school debt for 2016 graduates, of which I am one. Actually, I graduated in 2012 from medical school, and I graduated from residency in 2016. But medical school graduates in 2016, their average debt was $223,060, which in 2024 money is equivalent to $291,139. That is a staggering amount, and it doesn't even include undergraduate debt. This financial burden forces many into high-paying specialties, not out of passion, but necessity. I myself was faced with this decision, like, do I want to go into primary care, which I didn't, even if it paid just as well as every other specialty out there. I didn't want to go into primary care. It wasn't what floated my boat. But even if it did, I would think long and hard about going into primary care because I know that I would basically never be able to pay off my student loan debt. It's just a fact. And so primary care, often it's off the table because of lower salaries. And let's talk about declining reimbursements. So even after enduring years of training and debt, physicians face declining reimbursements. For example, in November 2024, CMS, the Centers for Medicaid Services, finalized a 2.83% decrease in the physician fee schedule conversion factor, which is a key aspect of physician payment rates under the Medicare program. Meanwhile, cost of living is going up, inflation is going up, prices of everything are going up. And on what planet do you think it makes sense that the people that are taking care of our seniors and our children should be paid less? Tell me, make it make sense. It means essentially doctors are getting paid less for the same work. Imagine you show up to your job. Let's say you're not a physician. You show up to your job one day and they're like, hey, you're doing such great work. You've been so efficient that we actually think that this job, the work that you're doing, we think is actually worth 80% of what you're being compensated for now. As of next year, you will be making 80% of your current salary. Okay? Cool, thanks. And what can you do about it? Because you have basically embroiled yourself in $200,000+ worth of debt to do a job that you are tied to a medical license in a particular state to do. It's not as simple as just job shopping around and going to another place. Often there were non-competes present, so you could not, like, within a certain radius of miles, move your practice within the same town. You'd have to literally leave town, uproot your family in order to leave. All of these things, you just had to just grin and bear it and eat it. You just had to take the L. It doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. And so it means that doctors are getting paid less for the same work, which makes it harder to sustain practices, especially in primary care, which already in 2012, when I was graduating from medical school, was extremely low paying, $120,000 maybe for a pediatrician. So there's a systemic cycle here. You're drawn in by the noble goal of helping others. This is where I think it gets cult-like. You're subjected to grueling work hours and psychological pressure. You're saddled with massive debt. You are praised and being told, you are one of the elite, cue that lady who's like, you're one of my elite employees, That's essentially what it's like, oh, you are noble calling. I think they really truly prey on unsuspecting altruists, people who want to do good, people who want to make a difference, and they welcome them with open arms, and then saddle you with massive debt, which forces you basically into this exploitative compensation structure where you are saddled with this job and they make it impossible to leave. They will penalize you with these non-competes if you leave. And not only that, but then pay you less overtime, all while you're still being saddled with massive debt. Meanwhile, your responsibilities are increasing because CMS is not only telling you we're going to pay you less, but they're also saying we need more documentation, please. We need you to spend less time per patient. This is not the doctors asking this. This is this is more than just being like, oh, boo-hoo, rich doctors get paid less than whatever. They still get paid more than me. Okay, yeah, but you didn't sacrifice 12 years of your life and your livelihood and your ability to earn any income. You've put off buying a house. You've put off having children. You put off getting married. You put off, meeting a significant other, starting a family. You've put off investment opportunities. And there's a whole revenue loss and milestone loss and that delay causes that has a cascade kind of watershed effect on the rest of that physician's life. Okay. And then you make it impossible for them to leave. You saddle them with massive amounts of debt. You tell them they're doing a great job and that they should just grin and bear it if they're paid less because, they are the everyday hero and they're the hero wearing a white coat cape, you know what I mean? It makes absolutely no sense. And to me, it is a cult because once you come out of it, like I have, as a retired physician, I can safely say that it is a cult. I 100% think it's a cult.
Tom Morrison says he recently had to work 32 hours straight.
I think you're kidding yourself if you think that you're operating at your best throughout that period of time. This is an email that New South Wales Health sent to every doctor who works in this state, which essentially describes that a thinly veiled threat that you're going to be referred to AHPRA, the medical regulator, and the Medical Board of Australia. These are bodies for serious professional misconduct, not for people who are standing up saying we're working in an unsafe system.
And what was your colleagues' reaction?
Very similar to mine. People just were astounded that there's been such a dramatic escalation.
First week working as a doctor, we worked 62.5 hours at a whopping $38 an hour.
There's just some really ugly things that the public isn't aware about. When I was a medical student in a Western Sydney hospital, there was a junior doctor who got kidney stones twice because he wasn't drinking enough water.
Because he didn't have time to drink water?
Correct. I had another doctor who basically shared with me that when they went to bed and they woke up in the morning, they were so stressed that they actually wet their bed. What sort of conditions are we putting our doctors through?
I feel complicit in harming patients because of the inadequacy of the service we provide.
My clinic is unsafe because there's so much urgent demand and not enough time.
If it's not urgent, it doesn't get done.
I just think it's very disappointing that this is the reality of the situation where junior doctors have to, collectively have a plan on how to not die when you're driving home.
So isn't that interesting? Doctors have to worry about themselves not dying, treating other people who may be dying. There's quite an ironic system to this, and the truth is that this is a very difficult subject to talk about. not just because of the complexity of this system and the amount of money involved with this system, but because talking about this topic, of all the topics I can talk about throughout this course of schooling, academia, science, this is the one that can get flagged the most on social medias, because health, unfortunately, is something that for some reason social media companies don't want people talking about.
They pushed us super hard to take down things that were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. I mean, a lot of this is documented. I mean, because Jim Jordan and the House had this whole investigation and committee into the kind of government censorship around stuff like this, and we produced all these documents, and it's all in the public domain. I mean, basically, these people from the Biden administration would call up our team and like scream at them and curse, and it's like these documents it's all kind of out there. All these different agencies and branches of government basically just like started investigating, coming after our company. It was brutal.
But the point that I want to share with you is I'm not here to debate all the details. I'm here to look at the cult elements. You see this in the medical schooling system, but then you see it in the actual workplace. In fact, the suppression of information could be seen as a cult-like tactic of its own. And there's a normalization of this behavior. You have to ask yourself as well, I showed footage of many nurses, doctors, people during a crisis dancing, right? And many people out there ask questions like, well, why are they dancing during a crisis? And why does it look like they don't have much work to do? Or if they are doing work, then why are they taking the time to film a TikTok video? Why are the hospitals empty when we're told that they are overworked and overloaded with patients? And is it making fun while all the problems of the world are going on? Not that we should be too serious, but does this dancing sort of hide the trauma, or does it help these nurses and doctors escape the trauma? They could be masking not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, traumatically, because people don't see all these problems in the health system. They're only looking at, oh, these people are here to help me, to serve me. They're not seeing the fact that these people may be working long shifts and they're stressed and they're not doing their job properly. They may not know any better. They're just a patient. They're just a consumer, right? They don't maybe even think that they should doctor their own lives. And notice the statements that are said on some of these videos. We risk our lives to protect yours. Wear this, do this, follow the guidelines, stay home for us. Doing this while dancing, while entertaining. And so they're dancing not just during a crisis, but also during a broken system. A broken system that even surpasses this challenge of dancing that took place particularly during the crisis, not even a couple years ago. This is 2020, 2021. We could be harming the people who are healing others, again, if they are or if they even can. But when we're talking about health, we can also look at another example, which is the field of mental health. Right? We look at the world and we see a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. Some of these problems we don't know how to treat exactly, but the treatment or the medicine could sometimes be worse than the disease. There is something called the Oak Ridge experiment, which wasn't necessarily considered an experiment. It was considered a treatment. But by today's standards, we might say it's torture. But again, we might have systems now that we might think are treatment, that we might think are not experiments, when in fact, they are very much not reality-based in the sense of caring for someone. Health care, we say. See, there's even an article, what happens when you turn a psychopath into a therapist? Well, here's more about this experiment.
They had the power and you did what they said or you didn't see daylight. What they would do is they would say, we want you to take an LSD treatment, or we want you to take an amytalmethadrine treatment, or we want you to take a scopolamine treatment. So we want you to write a request to us to do that treatment. Now you're going to write that request, whether you want to or not, because you're being told to by the people who hold the power.
sleep deprivation, being forced to sit without any movement for hours on end, withholding food, all part of the treatment. Sometimes patients would be physically lashed together, even to sleep or go to the bathroom, for hours, even days. And then there was the capsule. As many as 6 or 7 men would be stripped naked and placed in an 8x10 room for as long as 2 weeks. There was a simple wash basin and toilet, holes in the walls to provide food through straws, and a camera recording everything. The temperature and light would be altered from one extreme to the other. No blankets, no mattresses.
The point of the whole program was to break us down mentally, because they believed if they could strip away all our bad defenses that got us into trouble, break us down mentally, they could rebuild us as better human beings.
When asked by a BBC reporter if what they were doing amounted to brainwashing, Superintendent Boyd rejected the term, not the notion.
It's no doubt true that many of the techniques that they use in brainwashing are effective, and that we are using somewhat similar techniques. The group pressures, the use of drugs, the use of sleep deprivation, in some cases fasting. These things help to bring about a change in one's personality structure, which is what we're trying to do with these character disorders.
But that's not brainwash.
We don't use the term.
If we can't build them up, we'll blow them up. In other words, if we can't fix them, we'll destroy them. Everybody there came to a belief at one point or another that they were being destroyed.
Parliamentary subcommittee toured the facility and called the Oak Ridge experience not an experiment, but rather a technique of demonstrated success. Complaints were sent to the Ontario Ombudsman, who retained specialists to review the program. They found it to be one of the most forward-thinking programs in the world. But by the late 1970s, the controversial program was finally shut down over safety concerns by security staff. Many of those released went on to commit serious crimes.
What we found was the hurtling. Those psychopaths who participated in the program had a significantly worse outcome than the psychopaths who did not participate in the program but went to prison instead. This was truly remarkable that you could change the behavior of psychopaths, but it was for the worse.
And I couldn't control the anger. I'd lost any ability to get hold of that anger.
That anger led to more charges and 28 more years of incarceration, the last time over 19 years in Manitoba's Stony Mountain Penitentiary for attempted murder.
Who do you blame for all this?
You know, that's me. I committed the acts. They didn't. I did. So the only person I can blame is me for putting that rage in me, for betraying me when I needed help. Yes, absolutely them.
Here's an example of an institution that was designed to deliver health care to a group of vulnerable individuals who needed help desperately to deal with their psychiatric condition, and instead of getting proper medical care, they were abused, tortured, and put into all manner of programming that had no basis in science.
Both doctors and the province have declined comment, but in a statement of defense deny any wrongdoing, saying programs were only provided to patients who voluntarily requested the treatment. But under such conditions, was any level of consent even possible? The last thing Jim Motherall remembers about Oak Ridge was the suicide of his good friend.
And in the morning, when they found him, they cut him down and they pulled his body out into the hallway, and they laid it there, and we were in a sunroom program at the time, and all of us had to walk by him to go to breakfast, and I truly believe that their intent was to send us a very clear message. Human life really doesn't matter. We have no respect for it. This isn't just about me. This is about guys who can't speak. This is about guys who can't defend themselves, guys who can't tell everybody what happened to them. They just have to suffer in silence and locked up or in a mental institution. They don't have the opportunity to come out and confront these men. All those years when I heard over and over, take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for what you do, and they've managed to get away without taking responsibility for the last 48 years, and I think it's about damn time they did.
Okay, so I start every class that I teach by explaining to my students my pedagogical approach. I say, my job is to irritate you.
Interestingly enough, the organization that took over the Oak Ridge location Waypoint has been associated with all sorts of allegations and sort of human rights issues, not exactly parallel to the Oak Ridge scenario, but still nonetheless questionable. Now, of course, my goal is not here to paint a picture and to isolate problems and say this is the whole system. But it is important to know what is possible, especially within a system that proclaims to give health or care that could absolutely give the opposite. It's more of a reason to take more personal responsibility over your own health, for instance, or to do your research and be more vigilant as a consumer, as a patient. So you're not just taking the doctor's orders, just as much as maybe you are not the person participating in these experiments and going along with it and enabling it, because these experiments went on for over 48 years without any sort of, backlash, any sort of investigation. In fact, only getting praise, like demonstrated success and forward thinking, when again, we would consider this torture. But who's investigating it? Who's willing to question it? Are they allowed to? Right? But they need help, right? These patients, they need help. And someone says, oh, well, there's no basis in science. Well, I'm sure they would want to defend and say, this is definitely based in science. So you see, the cult-like fanatical nature of this is the coercion that's involved, and the deception, more specifically, and then even more specifically, the normalization of the coercion and the deception, the false consent, the, oh, it's safe, oh, it's consensual, oh, you agree to it. That doesn't therefore make it right. That doesn't mean that this should be imposed on everybody. This doesn't mean it is the forward-thinking way that everyone must partake in. It doesn't mean that we go ahead with this as our treatment. See, in the current healthcare system, there's people who have all sorts of complaints. If we want a better system that treats more people, but doesn't want to have more clients, more people who are sick, but actually wants to heal them, that means we want less clients, less people who are sick, then we have to question our current methodology and be open to other forms of methodology. Fortunately, I run a great project called Health Revealed at healthrevealed.org, which is a collaborative effort between many different people in the medical profession sharing their personal testimonies and experiences. Here is one account.
Diagnoses that supposedly are not related to childhood trauma and are instead related to genetic problems and biological problems and chemical imbalances. The fraud of science that doesn't really want to ask questions about what really happened to children. Science, by definition, the search for truth, which in the hands of people in denial, scientists in denial, becomes instead a quest to block, to deny, to refract, to defend abusers with all these diagnoses and labels, and then instead of helping people look at what happened to them, give them a context where they can be loved for who they really are, help them really study themselves, help them build a new family based on love and respect and empathy and truth. Instead, well, let's give them pills and let's give them some different technique which will help them work out the surface of their problem, just on the surface. Let's give them CBT and DBT and this one and that one and this one and lots of codes and fancy sounding stuff that doesn't get to the heart of what the issue is and isn't intended to get to the heart. Because when people say, I didn't have a good childhood, the heart gets opened. Then truthful questions can be asked. Open questions can be asked. Questions that have answers that, well, don't protect the family, don't protect society, don't protect school and siblings and religion and politicians and leaders. Questions instead that have answers that lead to anger, injustice, frustration, sadness, bitterness, and then tears of grieving. The only way to heal from a childhood that wasn't so good.
Questions that challenge us, that lead to anger, to frustration, in a good sense, to help us see more, Well, we know that we probably shouldn't coerce ourselves too much under the pretense of it's going to eventually help us. But maybe this type of challenge is good in one sense and bad in another sense. It's seeing the nuance and how we are challenging ourselves. Is somebody just asking me questions to break me down emotionally so they can get me to buy some sort of program? Are they just preparing my mind so I can become more vulnerable so they can interject with a bunch of information to brainwash me? There's a whole bunch of methodologies out there that exist, and they could be helpful, and they could be helpful in a way that is actually harmful. But the core question here is when we are asking questions, like these very questions, am I coercing you? Or am I just wanting you to think for yourself and actually free yourself from all forms of coercion? See, here's an example of someone who's questioning someone who has quite a bit of power in the world of medicine, and see how he responds.
Let me ask one question. All right, so you said that puberty blockers are reversible, right? What they're recommending, the time to use these blockers are Tanner stage 2 before the onset of puberty, when children are 11, 12 years old, right? WPATH, right?
Again,
even
I'm not going to say this again. I'm just going to say it one more time. I'm not an expert at all. I'm not an expert at all in the science that you're talking to me about. I defer to the experts. If you would like an opinion from an expert on this, feel free to talk to an expert.
So infertility is a result of puberty blockers being used in Tanner stage 2. A micropenis is a absolute... Wait. We've seen in the most recent HHS report, all those organizations have been implicated in concealing evidence that doesn't support their recommendations, right? These people are hiding studies that don't support their conclusions. That's what WPATH was doing with Johns Hopkins University.
Are you telling me that you're telling me that the people that take care of these patients at the University of Michigan are hiding data?
They might be involved in it if they're in WPATH and were responsible for making those guidelines. Absolutely. That's beyond a doubt. We have that information from the Alabama lawsuit. Go ahead and file a case against them and
we'll see where it goes. But that's not at all what they do. This is a theory.
No.
But there's no data about it.
All you have to do is read that report. I can't believe you guys haven't read this. I mean, you guys are the leaders of the AMA.
These questions help frustrate people to help them open their own mind to possibilities. They are not to break someone down emotionally to be manipulated. If anything, they just want answers and they just want some transparency. They are hoping to be healed, in a sense, by getting a response from somebody who claims to be a healer, hoping that the healer will say something and not just ignore them and attack them, right? So I think it's important that we consider this is why politicians get questioned. This is why the media gets questioned. Questions are not a bad thing. It's what I've been doing through the majority of this video. But notice here that some people don't like questions because they'd rather just stick with assumptions. They'd rather stick with their own belief systems and what they currently know or what they think, and they may even use that as their mode of medicine, which can be quite dangerous because then you're not considering your client, or you're not really trying to have an unbiased sort of I'm going to heal anybody approach. I'm going to just find the truth at whatever cost approach. I am going to be someone that presupposes, that has an agenda, that is going to do certain things certain way.
But I'm so upset that you're Israeli. Like, eventually you're gonna get killed and you're gonna go to Jahannam, inshallah.
Jahannam, Arabic for hell.
Why do you think? Why do you think I'm gonna get killed?
It's Palestine's country, not your country, you piece of.
That woman, Ahmad's nursing colleague, Sarah Abu Lebda.
How are you doctors? Wait.
I want you to remember my face.
Okay,
so
okay.
You can understand
Gotcha.
That you will
I have a question
the most disgusting death.
All right.
The vile video filmed while the nurses were working. They should have been caring for patients. Instead, they were threatening them.
Let's say an Israeli. God forbid.
I won't treat them. I'll kill them.
You'll kill them? So if an Israeli is in Australia and God forbid something happened to him and he comes to your hospital, would you kill him?
You have no idea how many Israeli Khara dog came to this hospital and I sent it to Jahannam. I literally sent it to Jahannam.
Within hours, their vitriol went viral.
And meanwhile, when someone's looking for care, they might not even be able to find it.
You have patients that have been to every other place and they've been told no. And they come here and we take care of them.
So recapping here, the failure of medicine, many health practitioners in recent years have lost or have had to step down from their positions. It's also that the doctors want transparency and the patients want transparency. You can see these headlines: 1 in 5 doctors plan exit in 2 years, doctors leaving profession at higher rates than before some of the recent crises. And there's Burned Out by Dean Mafako, a whole book talking about burnout in the medical field. There's also other statistics you can look at, like this one: 40% of physicians feeling burned out, 60% of physicians feeling burned out over just the span of a couple years. And of course, you can say, well, this is only for this time and maybe it's going to get better, or maybe it will continue to get worse. The point being said, what if some of these physicians feel like they are beholden to their job, beholden to having to make money in this way and to continue their education and do what they're doing and not speak out and not try something new? All this stigma, which actually 80% of physicians, residents, and medical students say that they can't talk about, mental health and seeking help for themselves. This can be quite problematic. I mean, 45% of medical students consider suicide, 47% have sought mental attention, and 20%, just think of straight up quitting. These are just other statistics. 20% attempted or died by suicide. 31% agrees that their culture prioritizes well-being, but that's a rather low number compared to the vast majority, which absolutely say that their workplace does not prioritize well-being. I mean, it's literally a medical workplace. So we can ask the big question: how do we feel about traumatized people treating traumatized people? And in the case of trauma, many people may not see the trauma that they have, or even what happened in their own childhood, as a link to what's going on right now. They may not even feel like they should address their own traumas if they do understand they have traumas, and they just want to suppress it. And so this is kind of cultish, and the fact that there's this coercion involved in the medical field, and maybe even toward ourselves, and not wanting to actually seek real health or help. There's literally a book called Death by Medicine by Gary Knoll, who collaborated with several medical doctors, and he says that drug company representatives write glowing articles about pharmaceuticals, which are then signed by physicians paid handsomely for their cooperation. A sort of coercion, you can say, though they may not know about the adverse side effects of the drugs they promote, so that can be some sort of deception. The most toxic substances are often approved first, while milder and more natural alternatives are ignored for financial reasons. There's many other books like this one, Overdiagnosed: Making People Sick in the Pursuit of Health. A nationally recognized expert offers a searing expose of big pharma and the American healthcare system's zeal for excessive medical testing. This is a book by Dr. H. Gilbert Welch, but there's many works out there detailing the problem with the medical system. But if you do look at the top ones that cause the most amount of deaths annually, you're going to see heart disease, stroke, but then you're also going to see medical errors and democide. Now, these two are barely talked about, as we know, because of the burnout and because of the overworking, that actually can be a contributing factor to errors. If you just look at what the FDA and some of these agencies that are said to promote health, what they have done over the years, you see armed raids, censorship and misinformation, removal and flagging natural health content, raiding natural healers' properties with actual weapons, warning letters and seizures, stopping sales of natural products like colloidal silver, anti-certain drugs campaign where they're spreading misleading info on purpose to discredit alternative medicines, regulatory restrictions banning or limiting therapies like CBD extracts, and anti-bioidentical hormone, restricting natural hormone alternatives. There's articles saying diet and exercise are better than drugs at controlling type 2 diabetes. Ooh, you probably don't want to tell an agency or company that makes profits off of putting people on drugs about this type of article or this type of study. It doesn't help anybody to make money if you are healthy and don't need to buy anything to make you healthy. There's a whole word called pharmakia, which appears several times in the New Testament. This is in biblical writings, which refers to witchcraft, sorcery, or the use of magical potions, but it's related to the words pharmakon, which means drug or poison, meaning one who prepares or uses magical potions. People have suspected that this word, which is related to the end times, is actually related to this word we use, pharmaceutical, and big pharma, and that maybe this is no coincidence, though you might find in history that the people who have been said to promote witchcraft and sorcery were those promoting natural medicine. And so it's very interesting as a connection, and I figured to share that. But there's a whole term called iatrogenesis, which is known as medical harm, and Ivan Illich, a philosopher, often details this through his works. There's the whole problem of labeling an illness or disease in the first place, not just overdiagnoses, but realizing what a diagnosis does in the very first place. An unwanted label can easily create additional resistance to treatment. It can be a narrow look at a problem. This can be exacerbated by a victim mindset, an imbalance which can cause the provider to have the hero mindset, an unhealthy perpetuation to get survival needs met based on pathologizing and impairment. Monetary gain and disability may also create dependence and may encourage dishonesty and further corruption. Over-identification with the diagnosis can backfire through rigid patterns where there is no room for change. This is often noticed in the field of psychiatry, and it's actually the whole reason why fields like Scientology exist as alternatives to psychiatry. Many people do attach to their labels. I am a diabetic. I am a schizophrenic. I have this, I have that. And one has to be careful with this over-identification with this thing that is taking over their body but is not them. And it has been shown that some people have reversed things like diabetes, so maybe this attachment isn't so necessary. And overcoming this disease is in part realizing that you're much more than that disease. You don't need to have that disease. And if we look at the book that often creates these diagnoses in the field of psychology, particularly the DSM-5, we can actually see that a study here says there is no knowledge on whether most conditions listed in the manual are true diseases. It says our classification of mental disorders is no more than a collection of fallible and limited constructs. It says psychiatry has long been criticized for medicalizing and pathologizing normal variations, and overdiagnosis means overtreatment. Here's another one where it says often it sets a bar too low and exposes both vulnerable people and normal ones to the risk of overdiagnosis and pathologizing normal conditions. And of course, there are many other works on this information, but I want you to just be aware of these. The effects of culture as well. If the culture is unhealthy, then the people who follow it will be unhealthy, yet they may be perceived as healthy, because we might label something as unhealthy, but is it actually? Just as a cult will say, oh, well, these people are crazy and these people need to be waking up. When do they really? You'll notice that many people are going away from drugs, going away from their doctors as they realize they may not actually need that. And there are alternatives. There is a growing interest in alternative medicine, all sorts of things, Ayurvedic, homeopathic, mud therapy, yoga, meditation, tai chi, qigong, biofeedback, guided imagery, hypnosis, chiropractic. There's so many fields out there. Why would we limit our ability to heal to just one field, especially when these can be often more gentle or less invasive than, let's say, drugs and surgery? And again, this is not always the case. There's always scammers. There's always people going to use, let's say, natural medicine for a greater agenda, or use some alternative ideas for a greater agenda. That is classic in cult behavior, but I'm saying it's happening in both fields, and you have to be, again, vigilant as your own consumer to recognize that there's going to be stuff like gaslighting and Hegelian dialectics. There's going to be people saying, here's the problem, and so you should probably take this solution, or I'm going to make you feel as though you are the problem so you can question yourself and then become dependent on me. So the supposed problems can often perpetuate the problems. New drugs, new laws, false flags. Who is really to blame? Where's the real solution? You could just be put into a state of fear or confusion, which then makes you, again, further dependent. And as we would know, fear and confusion is not so great for your own health either, is it? You need help. You're so emotional. Why so defensive? I wouldn't have done that to you. You're always twisting things. Don't be so sensitive. You're so dramatic. You sound so crazy. Calm down. And people sometimes get these responses when, let's say, they talk to their doctor about using some sort of alternative medicine. And they say, no, you sound crazy. You're being dramatic. And maybe just take this drug. And that didn't happen. Don't worry. I know better. I'm a doctor, right? And of course, there's many different ways someone can approach you as a doctor. There are all sorts of methods, but it's important to recognize that some people may disempower you for their own benefit. And a simple diagnosis puts you in a box where then you can be given a certain drug, as just an example. I want to, let's say, become healthy. And so you have this drug that gets introduced as the thesis, but then you have this antithesis, maybe this natural medicine that you know is not going to help someone. So you push down this natural medicine just to purport your own pharmaceutical medicine, and then from that you create this reinforcement of the agenda, which is, yes, you should take this pharmaceutical and you should be dependent on it because of this scapegoat, this bad problem. Or it could go another way where you're so diseased, oh my gosh, you can't be helped by anything, and maybe they give you a drug and it just makes it even worse, where you feel even more dependent on having to use more of their drugs and their systems because they created this problem in the first place, and because you feel like there's no hope, and they've got you convinced that there is no hope and that you have to go through their surgery and through their methods. These are all possibilities, and so I just want you to have an open mind. I mean, you see during COVID strong declines in autonomy and well-being among many people during this lockdown measure, which was said to help prevent disease and illness, but it's causing its own disease and illness in areas that people maybe aren't looking. 4 domains of social media: time spent, activity, investment, and addiction, all domains correlated with depression, anxiety, and psychological distress. And of course, social media was used often among people who are isolated, who can't talk to one another in person and just go next door to their fellow man. They had to even wear masks inside their car, inside of a Zoom meeting. Another way you can look at this sort of gaslighting or Hegelian dialectic is recognizing that the solution can be a problem. Again, the medicine can just cause the disease. Citizens are poor, and so when the state says, hey, we'll give you these goods, we'll give you shelter or police, they feel that their needs are somehow alleviated, not realizing that it could be the state which is destroying wealth and promoting poverty, right? And so for a time, those who depend on the state for healthcare, for instance, let's say, you say, I really need Medicare, I need healthcare, I need the government to take care of my health. Well, what if you don't have that, right? For a time, those who depended on the state for protection will go unprotected, but maybe in the long run, a free society will reassert itself in good health if given time to heal, because maybe a better system can take its place, or maybe that system doesn't need to be there. We see how many problems are created sometimes from one drug, when if we didn't have that drug at all, maybe the problem wouldn't be so bad. So we have this sort of addiction that we don't know how to get ourselves out of, to more drugs and more treatment, to more doctors or more laws, and it's happening at different scales of our society, where we maybe have to take a step back and ask ourselves, is this really needed? What is going on here? Why am I in this addiction? And I feel like it's not an addiction. That's part of the reason why it's an addiction. And the answer is releasing yourself from that addiction immediately, or as soon as you can. And it can be very hard. And you're going to have people who are going to try to intervene and say, hey, you are addicted, this is why, and you're going to be resistant to it, and you're going to say, no, you're crazy, I'm not addicted. But they're there to help you realize, as an outsider, that you are in this mentality, this fanaticism that you cannot see, where you are adamantly saying, no, I do not have this condition, I am not in a cult, I am not addicted, But in reality, once you escape it, then you can finally see and say, wow, I was crazy. How could I have ever done that? And then you can finally heal, and then you're finally free. Bruce Levine, a psychologist, talks about this. Most mental health professionals, especially psychiatrists, are naive to the reality that those professionals who are helpful have rebelled against their socialization and training. Genuine healers have acknowledged their wounds and opened themselves to healing. They've made themselves feel vulnerable. They've made themselves feel challenged so they can see greater truths at hand. He says healing occurs when there are healing connections which encourage openness. These conditions allow us to naturally move toward wholeness. He says, insanely, those charged with reducing our emotional suffering in behavioral disturbances are trained to be control freaks who then increase our emotional suffering in behavioral disturbances, which again will then justify more of their insanity. Thus, healing can only occur with rebellion from such insanities. That very notion that we're going to continue this cycle and this loop of disease treatment, not disease prevention. You even see in World War II, the Nazis were using their camps as delousing camps. They exploited public health concerns, particularly the fear of typhus, as a pretext for isolating and persecuting targeted groups. Under the guise of disease prevention and delousing procedures, they implemented increasingly brutal and inhumane measures in ghettos and concentration camps. Delousing rituals, including head shaving and exposure to Zyklon B gas, originally used as a pesticide, became part of this systemic process of genocide. Nazi doctors and officials used the language of public health and hygiene to justify quarantine, ghettoization, and ultimately mass murder. So we don't want this to happen again, but look at how many people fell for it. You're talking millions of people under the pretense of health and protection. There was even the government poisoning alcohol within the 1920s during Prohibition, mandating the addition of toxic substances to industrial alcohols, which were often stolen and converted into drinkable spirits by bootleggers. This initiative, sometimes referred to as the Chemist War, involved adding poisonous chemicals such as methyl alcohol and other denaturants to industrial alcohol supplies. Now, their intent was to discourage people from drinking illegally produced alcohol, but the program had deadly consequences. You're seeing at least 10,000 people died from consuming this alcohol before the prohibition ended in 1933. So again, a justification, well, if we just throw this poison in the alcohol, then people will see that they shouldn't drink the alcohol, then we can promote this other agenda. For the greater good, you're going to create this guarantee and harm. The same thing happens with milk raids that actually still happen to this day. As of me recording in 2025, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, conducted a series of raids on Amish farms in Pennsylvania that were selling raw milk. But this happens all throughout the country. In America, where we're said to be free, we can't consume something that has been used for thousands of years, promoted by the father of medicine himself, Hippocrates. So let's break down the history of medicine, shall we? The ancient roots dates back to ancient civilization, with Hippocrates, his principle of do no harm, being foundational. Then came the 19th century. The rise of modern medicine began with advancements in understanding diseases and the development of vaccines. Early 20th century, there was the introduction of chemotherapy and radiation as cancer treatments. John D. Rockefeller, a prominent industrialist, began to influence the medical field significantly. They released a Flexner report in 1910, commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation, supported by Rockefeller, which restructured medical education in the US and Canada. It emphasized science-based medical education, leading to the closure of many medical schools that did not meet the new standards. By funding medical schools and research institutions, Rockefeller ensured that the curriculum focused on pharmaceutical treatments, sidelining alternative and holistic approaches. And this led to what is often referred to as Rockefeller medicine. Now, mid-20th century pharmaceutical industry growth led to the widespread use of synthetic drugs. Late 20th century people are increasing their awareness of alternative treatments. And then the 21st century, where we are now we're starting to see we can integrate the conventional and the alternative, which is rather native. It's not so much alternative considering the fact that a lot of natural remedies have been used for thousands of years, and people are finally starting to realize how many drugs actually come from natural plants in nature in the very first place. And so people are seeing the problems with the medical empire, seeing how profit-based it is, how disease-based it is, and so maybe we can have a more holistic or big picture going in, less cult-like, where we say this is the only way, this is the only medical education. And in the same way, we saw that these same families, these same funders have also had influence over the regular public schooling system, as we detailed with John Taylor Gatto, who was an award-winning school teacher who wrote several books talking about how the schools were built to dumb down people and create obedience. That's not so great when you want a doctor who can be less obedient and more rebellious when it comes to finding out what's going to be best for your health by all means, any means necessary. See, when we talk about why doctors aren't doing what they're doing or why people put up with evil in history, we can look at the indoctrinated brain, a work by Michael Nels, MD, PhD. He argues that the decline in the mental capacity is not a random occurrence, but part of a targeted attack on individuality and mental freedom. He points to the global crises such as wars, climate change, and pandemics as tools, he says, used to create fear and uncertainty, which in turn make people more susceptible to manipulation and control. So they're being pulled into sort of a cultish or fanatical language or ploy that's then used to exploit them and be used for greater agendas. Again, this is the Hegelian dialectic and gaslighting. Thomas Saz says societies have always used various means to control and suppress dissenting individuals, and he advocates for the abolition of involuntary psychiatric treatment and the recognition of individuals' rights to refuse treatment. You'll see that there's many studies out there, like the Willowbrook hepatitis study, where it says people were deliberately infected with a virus without their informed consent just to study something, or the Holmesburg prison experiments, the prisoners were not informed of the risks involved, that it involves a level of consent not being present. The Monster study, the children who received negative speech therapy suffered from trauma and speech problems. Again, this is to experiment. This is for the greater good. Oh, there's not going to be any problems. Oh, this is done with a scientist. It'll be fine. Why were these studies condoned? Why were they committed? These are the justifications that people make. The Fernald school radiation experiments. Mentally disabled children at the school were fed cereal containing radioactive isotopes without their informed consent. And so there's many others, and you have to ask yourself, do the order followers who actually carry out the actions deserve any blame or responsibility? Or is it just the person who created the experiment? Is it just Hitler? Is it just Stalin? Is it any of these figures? Let's say the leader of health that you say is in charge of some health agency. Are they the ones in charge of your own health? Are they the ones in charge of the millions that administer these different drugs and medicines on a day-to-day basis? We do have to take responsibility as patients too. We can't just throw it on our doctor because we're the one actively taking what the doctor's telling us to take. And so consent comes with a challenge when people are believing that they're doing good and they believe that what they're doing is not bad at all. And they're trained and indoctrinated into that belief system, so they can't imagine any alternative or any possibility of doing something different. And because everyone else is doing it, it's just more of a reason to do it. You'll see a re-traumatization happen in the medical field. And here's an example where Bessel van der Kolk talks about this. And he tells the story of a woman who was previously, had different things happen to them in their childhood or earlier in life, and they refused to eat for more than a week and rapidly started losing weight. So the doctors decided to force feed them. And in that process, it brought back the trauma. And so what he says is, if you would do something to a patient that you would not do to your friends, your children, consider whether you are unwittingly replicating a trauma from the patient's past. And in the same way, when we're talking about addiction, are there addictions to things other than drugs? When we're talking about having healthy boundaries, because it's important when we're talking about psychology, are we just applying it to our relationships, or what about our relationships to systems, to things, to ideas? How are we integrating with those? Are we making ourselves full of identities? Are we treating things like they don't matter in all our environment around us? We talk about feng shui, perhaps we can see that there's a health connection between our environment and what we think and how we act. It's overall becoming more aware of what we are doing, but we cannot become aware unless we take the step back from our current positions and put ourselves outside the box for once. What is this person feeling? Not just what am I feeling? Medicaid, the government health program for the poor, spends more on the antipsychotics than any other class of drugs. Children from low-income families are 4 times as likely as privately insured children to receive these medications. 12% of children in foster care received antipsychotics, compared to 1.4% of Medicaid-eligible children in general. And so, is it really quite fair that maybe these people who are exploited the most by many of the systems they live in continue to be exploited? It's like the common saying, the rich get richer. And it's not to say that it's bad to be rich or it's bad to be poor within itself, but that these conditions are often used by people for agendas, and these people don't realize that they're being used, and then they're falling for what benefits come their way when it actually can just make them dig a deeper hole. Bessel van der Kolk also talks about the problems treating trauma and the ways that we currently do it. He says the brain disease model takes control over people's fate out of their own hands and puts doctors and insurance companies in charge of fixing their problems. Even as antidepressant use continues to increase, it has not made a dent in hospital admissions for depression. And he says 1 in 10 Americans now take antidepressants. How are we helping ourselves if we find ourselves with more patients, more clients, more drugs, more diseases? Just because we have more hospitals and more methods to treat it does not mean we know how we are treating it and what we are doing with these treatments. Thomas Saz says most individuals diagnosed as mentally ill do not initiate violence, while most psychiatrists routinely do just that. And again, they think they're not doing that. This violence is conceptualized and accepted as diagnosis and treatment, he says. And he says that we create this environment where people are not to be seen as responsible for their own life, because this fictitious illness supposedly impairs his ability to control himself. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. This is a quote from Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was certainly a rebel against many of these systems and helping people heal from a lens of philosophy, because people can heal not just from medicine, they can heal from religion, they can heal from family, they can heal from a good parent. They can heal in ways from just being in nature, of just growing food. But people may not see that connection. And again, their only resort and their only indoctrinated training belief system is to say, I need to go see the doctor. I need to get this certain test. I need to get this surgery. And here's a comment that says, it's scary how far conviction and a wide vocabulary can take people. No matter how old I get, there seems to be no end to human gullibility. So when we have health measures imposed on populations and people are going along with it, and people are okay with it, the others who are rebels feel like then they have no choice but to obey, we live in a system where it feels a bit like a trap. And if they ask a question, they're fired from their job. And if they refuse it, then they have millions of people who are at their doorstep saying they have to do it. Well, here's video footage showing that. And I think for what we're talking about, there's no greater example than what has happened in recent events with China. Freedom might just be a better measure of health because health at times may just feel like a cult. When you think of health, do you think of police raiding the streets, of people being forced to wear certain material, of people being told what to do with their own body? Or do you think of someone who cares and nurtures, who shows love and support, who guides, who educates, and lets you decide for yourself because it is so great information that you don't feel like you should resist or ask questions because there's no need to. There's transparency. And here you have a list of individuals, doctors, not alternative, homeopathic, naturopathic doctors, but individuals who have left their mainstream or conventional medicine fields to embark on a more holistic or integrative approach per se. And they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, so I'm not going to generalize. And I can't say exactly what each one of them has done in their life, but nonetheless, here is many individuals. And are we just going to say they're all misinformed, all wrong for leaving and speaking out or asking questions, all just trying to make money online and create a cult following of their own, as we would like to say if we are in a cult ourselves and we want to accuse others of being in a cult? See, many health professionals and experts from all different fields have converged, especially due to related events to what you saw in China, concerning what has happened in the world. And because they spoke up on what they felt to be true, they had to step down from their positions, or they lost their positions. They merely just want transparency. They just want to ask questions. And is that allowed in a medical environment, an environment that directly deals with people's health? It's certainly quite touching. You would get quite passionate yourself if you saw people being hurt before your eyes, and then every time you try to show them something that says, hey, you're going to get hurt, or this person's going to get hurt, and it's suppressed and it's censored, or and then it's hard to find, and then it won't get funded and it won't get studied, you'd probably go even more insane, right? So let's just have an open mind for a moment and notice here is one doctor who is among this list, and hear what he has to say when it comes to this type of ideology.
Steve Hassan defines a political cult as this: in order for a political cult to be successful, they have to do two things. They have to control the media, and they have to stop gatherings of people. Do you remember what they did in the beginning of COVID? If they can't control them through the media and through isolation, they often will take a tactic from very successful religious cults. The political cult will engage all of their followers and require them to wear a specific article of clothing. Every time you do that, you further ingrain the belief of the narration coming from the cult leaders, which is Big Pharma. If you go look up USA Today, Washington Post, look up New York Times, look up Reuters, look up factcheck.org and PolitiFact, go look them up and type in my name, Dr. Artis, on any of their websites. You will see just hit piece after hit piece.
Yeah.
That everything I have projected, shared, research, studied, testified in Capitol buildings around the United States in relationship to COVID, everything is being challenged as it is fake, disinformation, blah, blah. The medical profession woke up. All the medical doctors realized the research I gave was true about remdesivir, coined the phrase run death is near. And man, thousands upon thousands, maybe millions around the world eventually, but thousands around the world have walked up to me and said that my information saved their loved one's life, kept their loved ones in a hospital, helped them get out of a hospital, and saved their lives. And they believe that was a credit to my relentless effort to spread the truth to them. My whole world was controlled by a religion. The pharmaceutical industry controls all of it, including religion, which is why the Mormon leaders, the Pope, all in unison, actually told you all. What did they all say? This is amazing to me. Okay, these are the leaders of religions and supposedly the oracles with God, speaking for God on the earth. What did they tell you in unison for the last 4 years the world needed more than anything else? It wasn't faith in God. It wasn't getting on your knees and praying. It wasn't building a relationship with God. It wasn't trusting God's natural immunity put inside of you. No, what did they tell you? The Pope, Mormon church leaders, everyone needs to get a COVID-19 vaccine. I, Dr. Artis, have more faith in God's pharmacy called nature than you do. And if you believe that this perfect created baby in the womb of you or your loved one, and that baby comes out and you look at that perfect 5 fingers on each hand, 5 toes on each foot, and you're like, look at this miracle God made. You know what the first thing is that man and science and pharmaceutical industry tells you?
Inject the baby.
This beautiful baby designed and created by God that you believe is in the image of God. Actually, supposedly you believe that. There's a man in a white coat or a woman in a white coat standing right next to you saying, we need to take this creation by God and we need to inject it with a hepatitis B vaccine.
It's crazy.
Because God forgot an immune system. I have 5 kids, 4 of them are adults now, never vaccinated. Went through public school, universities, none of them. And they're all healthy. No drugs, no antibiotics, no nothing. And they're completely healthy. So is it true that in order to be healthy, you have to have man's injections inside of you for your immunity? You don't really need your spleen. You don't really need your gallbladder. You don't really need your appendix. Okay, who put those in there?
God.
Oh, do you think he just got tired after 6 days of creation and he just screwed up on day 6, took a nap, threw in some extra organs that you really didn't need? Who tells you this stuff isn't necessary? And since when is being pregnant a medical condition? It's actually called a medical condition.
Really?
Really. How is all of life that God created on this earth, all the animals, all the species on the planet, how can they repopulate and it not be a medical condition? They're all out in the woods giving birth to babies. Deer, elk, moose.
Yeah.
And none of them need a C-section, and none of them need a vaccine when they're born. And these species have lasted the millennia the Earth's been around. I want you to read the title of the cover of Time magazine, January 11th, 1999, which is in last century. We're in the 2000s now. Okay. It actually reads across the front, the future of medicine. So if you're wondering what your kids are going to get into or you wanting to be a medical professional, what you're getting into, Time magazine laid it out for you. What is the future of medicine? And they have a subtitle to the title of what the future of medicine looks like. It's all right on the cover. And it reads this, and I'm quoting, how genetic engineering will change us in the next century. Science wants you to believe they have figured out the human body and they can design it better than God did. And if you go on the World Health Organization's website right now, they actually have a frequently asked questions section, and it says, where did the logo come from? You should read the paragraph. It actually states that the serpent around the staff is a symbol of the cult of Asclepius because he led a cult, I'm quoting, their cult worshipped snakes. Latin is what they behold to. Makes things look mysterious, complex, scientific. We don't understand your terminology. We can't understand it because we don't know Latin. When I was vaccinated before 1986, I was born in 1976, but by the age of 10, I'd only gotten 8 shots. That was the normal for my whole childhood. That was normal. Now it's 72 shots before the age of 18. So
I'm so concerned for the future generations, honestly.
So bee, wasp, scorpion, snake, and spider venom infused in the seed, and they publish the crops that grow: soybean, rice, wheat, corn, cucumbers, melons, all of them. I have the articles to show you. I have the research studies I've been showing the whole world for several years now. That the majority of your crops now are grown to grow venom and are engineered to grow venom in the stalk, the stem, the leaves, and the fruits of those plants. And do you know why they say they're doing this? They say all of society is benefiting from these venom-laced plants and crops because when pests come to eat them, they will eat the plant or the leaf, and then the venom goes inside of them and they die from the venom. So it's a natural plant engineered by man to create venom inside of it that kills the insects that try to eat them. And they're saying all of human beings and human life and society, I'm quoting from their research studies, are benefiting from the engineering of crops to produce venom inside the plants. Really, if we're all benefiting from that, how come this is the first time you've ever heard it? Don't you think they would tell you what they're doing for you to benefit you and your life? If it's killing all the insects, what does the venom do inside of you when you eat it? Hey, you've learned your whole life that life requires for animals and humans air, water, and food every day, right?
Uh-huh.
You remember those 3 principles?
Mm-hmm.
Air, water, and food. Now we believe, look at every senior citizen in America, for an example. Now it is a belief system, almost like a religious belief, that everybody on earth requires air, water, food, and prescription medications or vaccines. And most people in America over 60 years old are waking up first taking medications every day the rest of their life as if this is required by life. It is not. You're required air, water, and food, and the quality of your air, water, and food dictate the quality of the life you live.
And even if you don't agree with these points, you have to admit it can help provide a lot of accountability to the current medical structure when you have people saying, well, what about this medical literature? What about this? And what about that possibility? Having this discourse enables us to sharpen our science or our philosophy, like asking questions and getting challenged, so that way we can start to see if maybe this hole is going to become a bigger hole, right? We might not look at it because it's small at first until it becomes big. We may not learn until we experience and get hurt again and again till we finally start looking at something. It's like when someone plants a seed of knowledge, you don't expect it to just grow into a tree right away. It takes time to get there and a lot of resources and experience to finally get there and then actually start to produce any fruit, right? And so you have to observe as well, nature isn't asking you to be coerced by another and pay this nature money. It wants you, in a way, when you understand nature, to be self-sustainable, to be autonomous. When you know it, you love it, and you start to embrace it and say, I think this is a good idea because I'm not dependent on the grocery store. I'm not dependent on a doctor. I'm not dependent on a government or whatever it is, because you're starting to see some sort of innate intelligence. You're starting to see solutions that are all around you. And some will maybe believe that's not present at all. Some believe that nature and health is just by definition imperfect. You come into this life and you are imperfect. Religions can use sin as an excuse and say, well, yeah, we need technology. We need the internet of bio-nano things, little nanotech inside of our own body. We need to genetically engineer ourselves because we aren't perfect and God doesn't exist, the atheist will say, and so they'll use science as an excuse. Everybody's trying to find a justification to back their ideology, and these alternative doctors can be doing the same exact thing. But the question is, are they pushing an agenda? Are they trying to make money? Or are they trying to find the truth? And finding the truth means that they're not necessarily attached to what they want to share. They're not saying you have to comply and this is the only way. They're just saying, I see this thing over here. Could we check this out? Could we look over here for just a moment? See, it's not just survival and the lack of incentive making it hard to heal people. It's also censorship and attack. And more people from very prominent positions are starting to see this, like this individual.
For 110 years, we the people of the world have been lied to. We're a group of very small number of criminal industrial conspirators decided to subordinate the entirety of the human population for the purpose of their sinister plans to enrich themselves while impoverishing and killing the rest of humanity. And I'm done being polite. We've long passed polite. When the words acceptable death rate become part of an industrial norm, we have lost the plot of humanity. And that's not my words. Those were the words of the World Health Organization and of Pfizer and of Moderna when they were given the authorization to begin the process of killing human beings in the interest of advancing their goals. I happen to be, for the United States government, in the early part of the 2000s and the latter part of the 90s, a person who was sent around the world to look at the proliferation of biological and chemical weapons. I'm acutely familiar with the definition of what a biological warfare agent is in the 18 U.S. Code, the criminal code of violations of biological and chemical weapons. And so my assessment is in fact professional and right. And the reason for that is I'm the one credentialed to make that determination for the United States government for many years. That's why I say it. But let's pretend for the moment that I'm just a nut job. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So why don't we look at what the criminals said themselves, shall we? In 2005, at a conference sponsored by DARPA and the MITRE Corporation, Ralph Baric, the architect of the lethal strand that has been injected into millions and billions of people's arms, that Ralph Baric was sponsored to present the following, and let's go ahead and use his words, presentation: synthetic coronaviruses, biohacking, bio-warfare enabling technologies. Criminal racketeers price fixed with interlocking directorates where known competitors came together and fixed prices in direct collusion, in violation of both European Union standards and in violation of both the Sherman and the Clayton Act in the United States. These were crimes, it was organized crime, and we should treat it as such. This is my call to every single person on this planet. Don't just limit the power of the WHO, destroy the WHO. Thank you very much.
But oh my, don't we need this organization for our health? See, he shared many different slides, and I encourage people to check it out if they want to learn more. But there are many great resources, many great people out there who are speaking their mind, some very passionate, some maybe fanatical, some agenda-oriented. But I think it's all part of the discourse, especially when they can show different points of view that come out of science or come from medical professionals and come from their own words. It's worth observing what those words mean and how they are used on the population, because that's where fanaticism breeds, whether in obedience or in rebellion. Can we live without having to deal with this tremendous amount of stress from the media and from these governments, wondering, oh my gosh, is my life in danger from this thing that they're really warning us about over and over again 24/7 with big numbers on the screen? So all in all, how do we create a better system? Do we get rid of some systems? Do we replace it? What do people generally think?
They want to do deep, like holistic healing, where it's like, I want to help people be well, not just like preventing, not just like putting band-aids on sickness. I want to actually help people like learn how to heal themselves and take more natural approaches. And so those are the kind of people I attract. It's like, I think that the theme of that is real lasting change for people. I like challenges, but I want them to be the right kind of challenge. I want them to be a challenge that makes me more of the person that is my best self, not a challenge that makes me like shrink and become less of who I want to be. Like one of my clients was celebrating, like, I'm not crying on the way to work anymore, but like, what a low bar. Why are we in this place where we're just trying to tweak to tolerate and salvage something? When I really connect with clients, what I'm most interested in is helping them connect to their truth and identify their best case scenario, like reclaim their bold dreams and visions, not just how can you continue going in a system that is like really suppressing who you actually are. So what I'm actually more interested in is not trying to make these little modifications and getting to the heart of, but what do you actually want? I think the whole thing needs to just have a makeover and be completely readjusted. I don't think there's anything we can really change to make it what we really need it to be.
Now, from my own investigation on this, I'd say a lot of people think, yeah, it's so broken beyond repair. You basically just need a new system or to get rid of this system. But in doing so, notice what she proposes as the alternative, a true or higher self. So if we perhaps become self-sustaining and less dependent on external forces for our own health, there's not deception, there's real lasting change, as he says. She says it's a challenge for more of the person who is my best self, not a challenge for who makes me less of who I want to be. Well, when we're talking about cults, we're usually talking about forms of identities that pull us in. And when we say, hey, I don't need any of these identities, I just want to be me, that's a very freeing effect. Or, like many of the cult experts said, exploring so many different identities in cults that you form still your own identity, who you actually are, as she said, your truth. But you might even notice that people could be sharing alternative medicine while still attaching to this idea of, oh, well, I'm a doctor, this is what I study, that's why you can trust me.
Here's how to take oil of oregano the right way. And if you don't believe me, I'm a pancreatic cancer researcher, so biology is my thing. I'm very picky about the kind of stuff that I take, so I only ever take the one from microingredients.
And I shared that last part because I think it's important to recognize that people online especially could be trying to sell you something, not just in person. And so when we're studying this, I think that even if, let's say, what she said is true about oil of oregano, we have to ask ourselves, is it true that she is this medical practitioner? She might have knowledge of what to do with oil of oregano, but does that require that you are a medical professional, as she insinuates by saying, oh, if you don't trust me, I am this? Do we really want to mix truth with lies? Or knowledge with identity? Do we really want to play with the language of the appeal to authority fallacy? So how do we move beyond this then? How do we go beyond this doctor-patient dynamic? How do we go to a situation where patients don't need doctors because they're healthy? How do we go to a scenario where doctors are healthy and they are still helping their patients, but they don't have to be stressed and overworked and, in this crazy system where they have to do what the insurance company says and what the government say, and they're not influenced by their peers and the fact that they can't administer certain medicines and they are afraid of leaving the workplace? Well, I'd say it's about entering a new paradigm. And these are some of the slides from Health Revealed, which I think are important to maybe look at, going from the 3D to 4D to the 5D. the mental to the somatic, which is body feeling, to epigenetics and seeing maybe some of the integration of the material and the emotional, the cognitive and the feminine, the masculine and the feminine. And there's other charts like the drama triangle, seeing that there's the rescuer, the victim, and the persecutor. And sometimes we get stuck because we want to be the victim, or we want to be rescued, or we are looking toward the persecutor. What you'll see again and again is that it's one big relationship, because love within itself is such a healing phenomena. It's the mother and the father and the child, the provider, system, and patient. And if you understand this sort of triangle, you start to see things from different perspectives. The feminine sees things one way, the masculine sees things another way, and then the child sees things in a different way. But they're all essential ways, right? One view might be true, another is also true, but then how come they're different from each other? Can they both be true at the same time? This is navigating nuance, and this is being able to unify out of the division, getting beyond the Hegelian dialectic and seeing, hey, this thing was introduced because of this thing, and now I see, okay, they're being used for this greater agenda. I'm going to stay away from that. In the same way, if we see that we have many things that can make up our life, like this picture, the circle of life, this is used in integrative nutrition. I know this because I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, but I don't go around saying that to everyone, because frankly, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the information and what is actually helping people. I want to educate them so they can be their own health coach, and they'll chart and say, hey, I have a lot of creativity, but my career is not doing so well. Okay, well, how can we integrate creativity into career? What is different from your career that makes it different from creativity? And how can you build a relationship with your career, because your relationships are also doing good? Can I see that these fields are all connected as part of one big circle of life? Health literally means whole. And if we break it down from that very basic fundamental level, then we'd say, okay, maybe we can reach health. But the reason why we haven't is because we're not free, and we're not free because we're secluding certain information out. We're secluding certain medicines out. We're not allowing medical doctors or medical patients or medical students to truly learn, to truly practice. And I think a really good summary is this chart that says the era of distress is perfection, self-care even, isolation, performance, and no limits on work. Whereas true well-being is self-compassion, community, meaning and purpose, work-life integration, human qualities, not deity, not hero-like, not victim, not machine, but human qualities, vulnerability and growth, because the machines serve us, right? These titles, these positions, do we say that we created them to serve us, but then we get lost in these things that we create. And so coming back to who we are is seeing how all these things are affecting us, and then because we're taking that step back, we're able to use those things consciously, and we're able to say, okay, this is when I'll take this medicine, but this medicine doesn't define me. Oh, this is when I have diabetes, but this diabetes doesn't define me. Oh, this is when I'll use a doctor, but this doctor is just showing me what I can do for myself and what I haven't seen for myself. So this is, I believe, maybe coming to a bigger picture of health. But the one thing I am sure of is that it should not be treated as a cult, because that's exactly what performance, isolation, perfection, and deity-like qualities does. And if we're going to talk about deities, there are certain individuals in this world, maybe in charge of medical institutions, schools, sciences, you name it, and they are often seen as the person that you need to go to for the information, for the truth. And I think it's worth asking the question, can we find out who they are so we can know who we are?